I've never been attracted to alpha males at all. Never. Most of the black men that I've been attracted to, when I'm attracted to them, which is not very often, but when I am attracted to them, most of the ones that I am attracted to have I would say more of a masculine, feminine type of look to them. They're not overly masculine looking. They kind of have a pretty boy type look to them. So, because I like my men to be kind of pretty, I've always been attracted to men that have a very soft, masculine, feminine type of look. I guess you call them pretty boys. They're not overly masculine, and so I'm guessing that their levels of testosterone are probably more equal with their levels of estrogen. So, because I know a lot of black men, especially within the millennial generation, I don't really notice a lot of them having masculine and feminine type energies about them. They tend to be, it's almost like they seem to have a lot of testosterone in them, and you can see this in their features. Very, very emasculated type, or not emasculated, but very, very high levels of testosterone in their features. And I'm not, and never have been, attracted to men like that. Just never have been into them. And so I would like to tell you about this guy, this black guy, dark-skinned black guy that I was in love with for several years. We met at a nightclub. This was back when I was in my early 20s. I would say maybe closer to mid-20s, maybe, or maybe 23, 24-ish, right around in that age group. And he was sitting at this table at this nightclub, and it was real dark in there, and they were jamming the music, and I saw him, and I just kind of looked over at him and noticed that he had these very profound, very beautiful, handsome features about him. Very chiseled jawline, very, very nice, dark, onyx looking black eyes. His hair might have been probably a 4-3, kind of curly. His skin tone was probably like a dark chocolate, like I would say he might be maybe Jamie Foxx's skin tone, kind of like that. Not too dark, but more of a medium dark. Because dark skin to me, like very dark, would be more like, what's that guy's name? I can't think of his name. I'll try to think of someone in the meantime. But anyways, back to what we were talking about. But more of a medium dark chocolate would be like Jamie Foxx's color. Or gosh, I cannot remember the names of these stars for nothing. But we'll just say Jamie Foxx's color. And he just had these chiseled look about his facial features, very beautiful bone structure. His nose, he had a nice shaped nose, and you can see that his levels of estrogen and testosterone were more on the equal end, just very, very, very handsome and pretty at the same time. And so I just was in awe when I saw him. I just could not believe how attractive this guy was. And, apparently my vampire energy kicked in and, weaned out to him and lured his attention over to me. And when he finally noticed me sitting at the table looking at him, when his eyes touched mine, I looked away. And he was just kind of looking over at me. And I noticed he seemed to keep his eyes on me. So then after a while, he comes over to me and sits closer to me and just starts staring at me. And I was perfectly okay with it, had no problem at all with it. And then I would kind of glance over at him every now and then, and he would just be sitting there just staring at me. And so finally he gets up and comes over to me and asks me my name, and I told him. And the music was so loud that I really didn't get to hear everything he was saying, but we kind of talked a little bit back and forth, what little I could hear of him, of what he was saying. And one of the things that he said is, he goes, that I'm watching you, right? I've been watching you for a while. You are very, very pretty. And I told him, well, thank you, and he just would keep his eyes on me, and he just kept his eyes on me, and, he would just stare at me the whole night. And so when it came time for, he would say things to me off and on and just sit there and keep staring at me. And when it came time for the club to close, he went ahead and gave me his number, and I took it. And I think I might have waited for maybe 3 or 4 days before I called him, because that's just, vampires, we have certain rules that we have. And when I finally called him, he told me we talked a little bit on the phone, and he told me he was a self-employed painter, and that's what he did for his job. He would go around and paint houses and just whatever anybody need painted. And he was an entrepreneur, and just a very, very handsome guy. And so we talked for a little bit, became acquainted, and then I noticed when I met him that night, he was dressed up in this suit, because he always wore suits, very, very fashionable. And these suits were like tailor-made type suits, very, not something that you could just go and pick off of a store. They looked very tailored to his body build, and they looked just like they fit very well, and just very, very well made. So I'm not sure if he had some kind of personal person that sews clothes. I'm not seamstress. I'm not sure if he had his own personal seamstress that made his little suits for him. But he would, anytime I would see him, he would be decked out. Okay, we're talking tailor-made suits, nice shirts that he would wear under his blazers, and hair was cut very nicely. I mean, he just looked like a star. Just nothing about him was out of place. Body shape, tall, slender, just very nice looking guy. And so we talked over the phone, and he told me to come pick him up one day. I'm not really sure why, but he told me to come pick him up because there was something going on with his car. And so I went ahead and picked him up, and he said, well, let's go ahead. When he gets into my car, we talked a little bit, and then he told me to, he needed me to take him to this gas station so he could get something inside the gas station. So we stopped at a convenience store, and then after that we went to his place where he lived, and he told me to, once I got out of the car, that he had to speak with some people in his home, and to just wait downstairs very patiently. And so, I went ahead and came in with him and went and sat over on the couch. He went upstairs and met up with some other guys in the room. They stayed up there almost 25 minutes before I walked up there to see what was going on. And he's in this room just talking to these guys, and I'm sitting downstairs. And I told him, when are we, because we were supposed to be going to the club. And I told him, when are we, I asked him, when are we going to the club? And he was like, as soon as I get done talking here, just, go sit downstairs and wait for me, and I'll be done here in a minute. Well, another 20 minutes passes. So I'm sitting there almost 40 minutes. I get up and walk out and get into my car, and I just left. And because I kind of thought that was rude. This is our first date together, and I'm dropping him off, at a convenience store. Then we go back to his house, and he tells me to sit downstairs. Well, he's up in this room with these men, and they're having some kind of conversation, and I'm sitting downstairs just waiting on him, and 40 minutes passes, so I'm just not the type that will sit around like that. Actually, it's more like me to get up after 15 to 20 minutes and just leave. But because he was so handsome, I went ahead and stayed another 20 minutes because I wanted to, go out to the club with this guy. But I went ahead and left and went on to the club, and, I just kind of sat in the club because I knew eventually he would make it up there. Because all those guys that was up in that room with him, there might have been about probably 4 or 5 men up there. One of them had to have had a car, I know, so I figured he would catch a ride up to the club. And so he comes up to the club, which is what I figured he would do a little bit later, and he comes up to me, and I never said anything to him, and he sat down, and he sits there and just stares at me, and I'm just sitting there just, I looked at him, and then I would just, keep bopping my head to the music. I never said a word to him. So after sitting there staring at me for about 20 minutes, he finally gets up and says, I know you see me sitting here. And I said, yeah, I do. I see you sitting there. And he said, well, why did you leave? And I said, because I'm sitting down in your living room for almost 40 minutes doing nothing. I'm bored out my wits. The least you could have done is took me up there in upstairs so that I can hear what you guys are saying. And he said, well, that was a business conversation that I was having with those guys. And that's not something you would have taken an interest in. And so I just didn't say anything else to him for the rest of the night. And I just pretty much sat at the table, and we were just kind of looking at each other back and forth and, just listening to the music. And we just basically sat there the whole night with each other, not really interacting. And a couple of guys came up to me and asked me to dance. I went ahead and danced because he wasn't asking me to dance. And so after a while, I got up and, about a few minutes before the club was going to close, I got up and left. And so I guess maybe about 3 or 4 days later, he calls me and, he sits there and talks to me on the phone. And he told me that, I demanded for him to tell me what the conversation upstairs was about, because I was kind of fussing at him for letting me sit down there for 40 whole minutes on my own. And he said, well, nothing in that conversation would have taken an interest, would have been of any interest to you. And I said, well, why? And he basically told me in so many words that he was a drug dealer. Okay. So once I found that out, of course, that was the end of that. But I was hoping, because I kind of, when I walked into his home, his apartment, and then he told me to wait downstairs, and then he met with these guys upstairs. I kind of thought something seemed kind of off about that. I kind of thought there's something, why would you tell your date to wait downstairs while you go upstairs and have a conversation with a bunch of other men that your date can't sit in and hear what's going on with that conversation? So, I kind of thought to myself something was very off about that. But he told me in so many words that he was a drug dealer, and I had to let him go. But, throughout, I kept going to the club basically for him, to see him, but we didn't really interact with each other, because once he told me he was a drug dealer, I never called him again after that. And when he tried to call, I wouldn't answer. He might have tried to call 3 or 4 times after he told me he was a drug dealer, and I never answered. And so he gave up. But I would go to the club and see him up there. And of course, he would sit down and stare at me the whole night. From a distance, though. He wouldn't come and sit with me like before, but he wouldn't dance. And I noticed all these men would come up to him and talk to him and interact with him and then go on about their way. Just a lot of men would be going up to him to talk to him. And so that's kind of when I figured, well, he must have been telling me the truth, because how does he know all these people? It was just a lot of people that he knew. And of course, he kept his eye on me too. Very, very, everywhere I went, his eyes followed me. He wasn't finished with me, because he wanted to pretty much pursue whatever it was that he was after, but he found out that I wasn't the type of female that would just stand for anything just because he was extremely handsome. Because with me being a sexual vampire, that's just not what we do. And I had a hold on him because of that vampirism. I had a very, very strong sexual hold on him. And that's why I kept going to the club, because that energy that I have was working on him. So we kept going up to the club. This went on for about maybe 3 months, not really interacting with each other, but going up there really to see each other. And his eyes were on me the whole night, and I knew that his eyes were on me. And I would just go up there, dance with these other guys, and just sit in these corners, and he would position himself so that he could see every move that I made. This went on for about 3 or 4 months, and then he stopped going to the club after a while. And I would get these phone calls where he would call and then hang up. And that was back during the time where they just had pagers, not really cell phones, but pagers. And so he would call, and then he would just hang up. And so it was just really weird. And then, after 3 or 4 months, he just stopped showing up at the club and just, I guess, went on with his life. And every now and then I would see him up at this club. And anytime he saw me, he would stop whatever he was doing, go and sit down and watch my every move for the rest of the night. And so really all I was going up there was to see him, because we were in love with each other. I could tell. But we just had so much of an ego, both of us, that we really weren't willing to be the first one to go up to each other and to break that ice. But we were willing to go up to the club and sit there and watch each other the whole night. And so I think he had a form of sexual vampirism, and I also had a form of it. And vampires, they can be they can be like that. We're very, very, very patient when it comes to people that we want to have a sexual encounter with. And that's pretty much what I wanted with him, because he was so extremely handsome. I think he's got to be probably one of the most handsome black men outside of Hollywood that I've ever seen. I mean, very, very attractive black man. I don't think there's a single man to this very day outside of Hollywood that can beat him out. And to see something like that in real life, that's like a once in a lifetime thing, to have something like that happen to you. Okay. And so I think, that he did kind of have a form of vampirism, sexual vampirism. I'm not sure if he was aware of it or not. Probably not, because most people back during that time frame called it a player. But it was really what a player is someone that has a very, very strong sexual energy. And they can use that energy over other people and control them with this energy. Okay. And I was born with that energy, born with a lot of knowledge that was given to me, I guess maybe from a previous life. So there was a lot of things that I knew about being able to attract men that I was extremely attracted to, and I could actually keep them under my control just from having this strong pull on them. And then a lot of the times with this energy, I was able to capture pretty much almost any guy I ever wanted and be able to take complete control of these people and have them in love with me for years. Okay. And I'm not going to, of course, tell you guys everything, but that is a form of sexual vampirism. But anyways, this guy, we never did get together. We never had the sexual encounter that I was looking forward to having, because his ego was too high and my ego was too high. And so we would just see each other in that club, and we would just sit down and basically watch each other for the entire night. This went on for quite a few years. There would be sometimes I would go up to the club and he wouldn't be there, and it would ruin my whole night, because my whole point of going up there was just to sit there and watch him all night. Same with him. He would do the same thing with me, and this went on for years. And then one day, it might have been 5 or 6 years later, after not seeing him for a few years, I went in there and he was there, and I could have fell over because I was so happy to see him. But anyways, I went in there to get a plate, because sometimes they would fix meals and people would go and pick up their food order and just leave with it. So I just went in, and because I was going to order some catfish and some fries and whatever else I wanted to order, and I went in to the club one day and he was sitting in there, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. Okay, so he was sitting in there and I could have fell over. But anyways, with my ego, I pretended like I didn't see him. And so he walks up to me and he says, "I know you saw me." And then I just looked at him real deep into his eyes, and I said, "And what if I did?" And he said, You don't remember me?" And I said, "Of course I remember you." And we just looked at each other, and I said, "It's been a while, where have you been?" And, we just talked a little bit. But I couldn't really talk to him like I wanted to, because I was married. I had went off and I got married in the meantime. And so I could have given him my number, but I didn't, because I was married, and I wasn't the type that would fool around on my husband. I just did not believe in that. But I was very happy to see him in the club that day, and we talked for a little bit. And I told him, during this time that I never saw you at the club for a few years, I in the meantime, I got married. And he was just so shocked, and we talked for a little bit, and then I went on home, back to my husband. And let's see, I might have saw him in another club maybe a few years later. And of course, when I saw him, I was happy, but of course I wasn't going to say anything to him because I was married at that time. But it was nice to see him, though, just to be able to get a glance of him. It was nice, and he didn't know that I was married. And so my husband met me up there at the club a little later that day, and he saw my husband, and he didn't know that I was married. And do you know that when my husband, he was sitting there watching me the whole night, sitting at this table, waiting on my husband to get there. Then when my husband arrives and comes and sits at the table with me, and we're sitting there for a couple of hours, and he gets up and goes to the bathroom. Do you know he almost had my husband jumped? I had to go over to where the bathroom was, and my husband was arguing with some of his friends. And so I went over there and got him, and then I asked him what was going on, and he said these guys were just acting very weird, and they were trying to pick a fight with him. And so I went over to those guys and told them, this is my husband, back off. And they did. And later on, I found out that they were attached to my friend. Okay. So he was actually going to have my husband jumped just for talking to me. But yet, he was that type that would let me come and sit in a club all night long, not talking to me, and just stare at me all night. But then if he sees some other man with me, he's going to have that man jumped. And instead of just walking up to me and asking me what's been going on with your life, here's my number, let's go do lunch. He would play all these stupid games, like just coming to the club and sitting there and staring at me the whole night, And of course I didn't mind because the man was so handsome. It was just unbelievable. But anyway, to make a long story short, he never bothered my husband again after that. After seeing him at the clubs with me, he never, would bother my husband. And of course, I never told my husband about how I knew this guy prior to meeting my husband. I never told him anything about this guy because I didn't really want my husband thinking that, I was trying to have any type of connections with him behind his back or anything like that. But yeah, a few years later, after seeing him go into this other club, that I would go up to this club with my husband, and we would just sit there, and then we'd get up and dance, and then go sit, and then get up and dance and have drinks and stuff like that. And of course, my guy friend would be staring at me the whole night, not interacting with anyone, just completely his eyes were on me. But anyways, in the meantime, he goes and gets married himself, and the years would pass, and every now and then I would see him up at the club. Then I guess maybe 5 years passed, and I forgot how I found out that he had passed away. And so I don't know exactly how I found out, but somebody told me that he had passed. And I actually went to his funeral. I didn't bring my husband, but I actually went to his funeral to pay my respects. And then later I asked someone in the club that used to hang out with him, I said, what killed him? What happened? How did he pass? And he told me he had died of AIDS. Okay. And so I am so grateful that I never had any sexual encounters with him. I am so grateful that I did not go past my ego and just say, you know what, let's just hook up somewhere. I'll meet you at this hotel or whatever. Because so many times I wanted to do that, but something kept holding me back and telling me don't. Prior to me getting married, there were several times where I wanted to walk up to him so bad and say, you know what, let's just, hook up at a hotel and just get this passion out of us, let's just do it, but something kept pulling me back from doing that. And this is why I can't stress enough to you guys out there to listen to your inner self, your ancestral spirits that guide you. Listen to your inner voice, whatever it's telling you. Don't go up to him, just watch him. don't say this, don't do that. Listen to those voices, because had I given in and walked up to him and said, you know what, let's just go to your place or go to my place and hook up, I probably could have caught something from him. Okay? And so I am so grateful I never went past my ego to say anything to him. I would just see him at these clubs throughout the years, and I would just stare at him because he was so freaking gorgeous. And he did the same thing with me. I think he thought I was just as pretty as I thought he was handsome. We were very, very attracted to each other. But something told me not to, go past my ego. And I didn't. And I am so glad I did not. Because come to find out, he passed away of AIDS. He died of AIDS. And I should have known that something was really weird and something was off, because him being a drug dealer, him being that handsome, and every time I would see him, he would be talking to all these different men. And, they would go into the bathroom at these clubs. And I'm thinking that they're in there doing drug deals, and I'm sure that's probably what it was. But what else was he doing with these guys? I would never know, but somebody that good looking, he was probably having sex with other men. I wouldn't put it past him, because he was so good looking that he might have been both ways. I wouldn't put it past him, the way he would dress, and, these tailor-made suits. And I don't know whatever became of his wife, but, she did survive him. But I haven't seen her in years. But she wasn't that type of person that really went out a lot. She was a home type person. So I don't know if she ever caught it or if she's even alive. I don't know, because I haven't seen her in God knows how long. I haven't seen her or seen her since actually his passing, since the funeral. I haven't seen her since. So I don't know if she's still alive or what. But he passed away, and it was just weird. How I found out that he had passed. I saw one of his friends, this guy that used to hang out with him, and I went up to him and asked him, where is he? And he told me, oh, he just passed. And that's how I found out that he passed, and when the funeral was going to be. And I went to pay my respects. But when I found out he had passed of AIDS, I was so grateful that I did not try to lure him somewhere and, do him, because we were very, very, very attracted to each other. And I was really just like under some kind of like very strong energy. Whenever I would see him, it was almost like I would go into a whole different state of mind, and my whole attention would be geared towards him. And that's a part of vampirism. It is. And so I just thought it was the vampire energy, but I kind of think he might have been one too. And that's kind of why we would just go back and forth for years on end, just staring at each other, just looking each other up and down. And just the presence of each other was enough for us to feed on. And that feed would last for several months until we would see each other at the club again. We were satisfied with just looking at each other. And it was just really a very, very weird thing. Okay, and that's probably going to end this session of my video. But that just goes to show you, that you got to be very, very careful with people. And, I am just so grateful I did not break, the vampire rules and just walk up to him and say, you know what, let's just meet somewhere. Because that is a part of vampirism, to actually break. Somebody has to break the ice. And usually it's the other person. It's not really the vampire. Because we have enough pull a lot of the times to be able to pull them over, and they're the ones that break the ice. But I could never get him to ever come over and say it, even though that's really what we both wanted, was this sexual encounter eventually. But I am so glad I just did not do it, because God knows I wanted to meet up with him somewhere so bad and just, have this encounter. But something just kept saying, no, don't do it. Just enjoy how he looks and just leave it at that. And I listened to that inner voice, never gave in. And thank God I did not, because I might not be alive today. All right. And so that's pretty much all I have to say to you guys for this session. I kind of wish that, I could have had a relationship with him. I kind of wish that maybe whatever was going on with him, that we didn't meet like this. I kind of feel like I wanted to be a lot more verbal with him, not so much on a sexual energy attraction, but more just, I wanted to get to know him and talk to him and find out about him. But we were under this sexual lure that was so strong that anytime we saw each other, we would stay where we were at just to watch that other person the whole night. And it was almost like both of us were under some kind of trance whenever we would see each other. And it was a very, very deep trance where neither one of us would leave until the club was almost ready to close. Because what we did was we would just sit there after, we would be aware that the other one would come into the club. We would just sit there and just stare at the other person the whole night. I would get up and dance occasionally. Or, once I got married, I would dance with my husband or whatever. But I would still keep an eye on him because I was under some kind of pull. But it just never went anywhere because I wouldn't allow it to, because I was married. But even if I wasn't, I still would not have really taken it too far. But he was going to try to have my husband jumped for talking to me, because he wasn't, aware that was my actual husband. But then when he found out, he laid off. He didn't do that anymore. But it's just weird how, the type of, when you get around someone that you're extremely attracted to, the type of energy that can come between you guys is a very strong energy. So much so that it can last for years. And nothing ever becomes of it, because something is pulling you back. Okay. And this is why I think that there are people watching over you that you're just not aware of. And these people have everything to do with the spirit world. They're your ancestors. There's some type of, pull or energy that they have telling you, don't do this, don't do that. And, a lot of the times you should listen. And I did. And thank God that I did. Okay. So thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys later in another video. And have a good night.